so this is us, the presenters. We're just each going to take a moment to say who we are and what we do. I'm Courtney Price. I am the Education and Outreach Specialist for 2 plant science centers at The Ohio State University, the Center for Applied Plant Sciences and the Arabidopsis Biological Resource Center. So in that role, I run the K-12 classroom programs, as well as public outreach and community partnership programs. And I'm going to pass it off to Katherine to introduce herself.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Katherine OBrien, and I run the outreach program for the Museum of Biological Diversity, which is part of our Ecology, Evolution, and Organismal Biology department at OSU. And I also work very closely with the STEAM Factory, which is a consortium of faculty from across the university who work together informally to solve problems. And then I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Cynthia.
Hey everybody, my name is Cynthia Cannon. I am an outreach specialist for Ohio State's College of Pharmacy. I run a summer enrichment camp for high school students who are interested in biomedical, either research or clinical fields. And I also run a research lab in a museum in downtown Columbus, Ohio. And in that research lab, I work a lot with guests that come to the museum. I am mostly K through 12, and really trying to understand how we can use the museum as a space to do these science research, especially engaging kids in science through a pharmacology or scientific process, doing a lot of experiments. I'm going to pass that on to Monica.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Monica Delgado. I am from Mexico, but I've been working for The Ohio State University for the past 2 years, and I help run the outreach program there at the Department of Mathematics. So in short, what my job is about is to share my love for mathematics, and I try to help people see a different side of mathematics and hopefully learn that it's also beautiful and not as terrible as most people think. And the type of things we do is workshops at schools, workshops even for seniors. We have done that in the past, exhibits where we let people play with mathematical toys. And our main program, it's also a summer camp for middle school and high school students. Part of the goal is to try to increase the number of people who goes into mathematical careers, especially those from underrepresented populations. Before that, I also worked in an outreach program back in Mexico, and I have worked in textbook editing as well. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to Wayne.
Thanks, Monica. My name is Wayne Schlingman, and I am the Planetarium Director here at Ohio State. I also teach our introductory general education labs. So I sort of do a lot of outreach and formal education in the classroom. And the planetarium itself specializes in sort of hitting the entire range of people that are interested in education, whether that be, preschoolers that are coming in and you're sharing the night sky with them for the first time, all the way up through people that are semi-experts that are just completely obsessed with learning astronomy, but at all ages. I also am a part of a long-running summer camp down in Arizona that I became involved with as a graduate student and have continued for the last 16 years. And so there's a lot of opportunity to engage and work with people who have a fascination with astronomy. And I will pass it on to Jason.
My name is Jason Cervenec. I direct the Education Outreach Program at OSU's Polar and Climate Center. When I originally started, a lot of our work was doing the broader impacts projects on our NSF grants, but we're funded to do visualizations and some geosciences and polar education initiatives. And we also do a lot of work to help create content and get educators content on climate change. And this is my second career, and my first career was as a high school science teacher for a little over a decade. And I ran professional development and coached Science Olympiad teams as part of that. And I'll pass it back to Courtney.
All right, awesome. Thanks, everybody. And I just want to invite folks to turn on their cameras if you're comfortable, no pressure, but sometimes it's nice to know that you're speaking to someone other than a little black box. So Katherine, do you mind advancing the screen? So we are going to utilize breakout sessions during or breakout rooms during the session. And if you are someone who is utilizing the closed captioning in order to fully participate, please send Cynthia Cannon just a quick note so that as she is assigning folks to breakout rooms, then we can make sure that the captioner is with the people who need their services the most. And with that, I think we can go ahead and jump into the meat of our presentation. We want to just kind of give you an introduction to our origin story. As you can tell from our introduction, each one of us is from a different discipline within Ohio State University, but we've actually come to be like each other's person during the pandemic. We've worked together for a long time, but the pandemic really brought out a need to support each other. And it's grown into a lot more than I think we ever could imagine. But it started really back in 2017 with an on-campus event. And I'm going to let Jason carry forward the origin story from here.
So Courtney and I had worked together previously on some projects on campus, but for a lot of the outreach professionals at Ohio State, we really were siloed. There'd been meetings on campus every other month when I first started 9 years ago, and those had gone away. So a lot of us were establishing our own informal networks, and Courtney and I had been really excited about a STEM festival that up until that point, we didn't really have anything in Columbus that mirrored. We're also located on the West Campus, so this is a part of campus which often is far removed from the rest of campus. And so we wanted to do an outdoor event in the spring to kind of get people to our facilities, to showcase things, to allow us to connect with our peers. And we also realized that we were getting more and more calls for other groups and teams that were trying to do broader impacts, but maybe didn't have a professional. So we realized these all could be wrapped into one and deliver a really good program that I think we didn't anticipate the other informal benefits that would come from that by networking all of us and getting some of us working together on a more of a long-term basis. We spun this initiative up when Courtney was very excited about it. We'd written it up and we kind of sat on it for a while. And I said, if you want to go in on this, you're the only other person I will be willing to try this out with that I feel we can deliver a really good product and try to reach a pretty big audience. And it was a success from year one. So we're going into our fourth year. Obviously, we had a virtual year last year. And it really has produced all the benefits with the added benefit of providing us the network so we could be prepared for the pandemic.
My awkward hand there was, I think I was trying to show you 5. I think we're going into our 5th year.
That's actually right.
Oh, okay.
And so Courtney, I'll pass it back to you.
All right. So I don't know if Jason said the name of our event was called the West Campus Science and Sustainability Festival, which we've shortened to Westfest because it's so catchy. So everything that we've done collaboratively up until about a week ago, we've branded as Westfest. And I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about that a little later, but we're trying to rename ourselves because not everybody in our collaborative group here is based on West Campus. And I'm gonna ask Katherine to advance the slide and pass it off to somebody else.
Me. Okay, so I think the slides are a little bit behind on my screen, but you should be seeing the next slide, hopefully. And yeah, we were going to, the first event, so we were just meeting and chatting and helping each other throughout this transition to virtual. And we decided, why don't we try to put together something in the virtual environment? And we knew teachers were struggling with this virtual environment. So we thought maybe we could create some professional development workshop or series rather. And that was our first event as a collaborative besides the Westfest, which was a different thing, I would say. And so we organized this series where we offered 6 different workshops, one for each of our topics or fields. So we had 3 days, 2 sessions per day, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. And attendees were able to sign up for any sessions that they wanted. So if they wanted to attend all the sessions, that was okay. But if they were only interested in one, that was also okay. And just to give you an idea, the titles of the sessions that we had. So for example, for the Museum of Biological Diversity, the topic was explore the mighty muscles of Ohio waters. We had playing with math, we had the solar system with the planetarium, we had preventing prescription drug misuse, exploring Earth's climate, past, present, and future, and greening the classroom using plants to teach science. So those were the titles. Again, 2 sessions per day, morning and afternoon. This was in August, so almost at the end of the summer. And we had about 75 unique attendees with an average of 30 attendees per session, more or less. So that was our first program together, and I think it went well. And so now we wanted to ask you, how much is your experience with professional development, right? I said we created this program for professional development. We're going to talk about our own experience in doing that before this series, but we wanted to ask you what your experience has been in putting together events or teaching or giving workshops on professional development for educators. So we're going to do a chat bump. So the question again is, how much is your experience with professional development, giving professional development for educators? And let's say that the possible answers are yes, no, or a lot. Let's stay within those 3, either yes, no, or a lot. And I'm going to give you a few seconds just to type your answer, but don't send it just yet. Wait until I say now. And when I say now, you click enter so that we see all the responses come in at once. So again, the question is how much experience you have giving professional development for educators, and start typing either yes, no, a lot. And I'll let you know when to send. Don't send it just yet until I say it. So it shouldn't take a lot, but. Right, so hopefully everybody is ready. So I'm going to count down, and then you click enter. So 3, 2, 1. Right, so it seems that most of you have a lot of experience with professional development. And Katherine, if you can go to the next slide, please. So for us, what it looks like, so we had a mix. We had some of us hadn't had any experience with leading professional development. Some of our group had a lot of experience with that, and we had everything in between. So that's a good thing. You can see that's a good aspect of putting together these sort of collaboratives, because not everybody had the experience, but since we had people with a lot of experience, we were able to put these through, and with the help of those who had more experience. So that's a good aspect of creating these partnerships. So can you go to the next slide, please, Katherine? So what we're going to do now is we're going to do a little breakout room session. So we have 3 different questions, and we're going to be working on each of the groups. So the first group who's going to stay here in the main room is going to be discussing the audience. So who are we reaching? Who are we missing, and how are we engaging? So sorry, we're only going to do 2 breakout rooms. One is staying here in the main room, and the other one is going to an actual room. And the questions are for the audience topic: who are we reaching? Who are we missing? How are we engaging? And the other topic is accessibility. So just talk about accessibility in the virtual environment. So sort of such as captioning, ASL, web accessibility, document accessibility, certainly a topic that is pretty important right now as we live in this virtual environment. So we're going to give about 7 to 10 minutes for this discussion. You're going to be with a smaller group in there, and we're going to be discussing, again, either audience or accessibility, because we want to hear what you think about that. And then we'll come back, and one person of each group is going to share back what they talked about in their groups.
So do we have somebody who would be willing to jot some notes down that we can report out when the group comes back together for our 3 questions? Thanks, Tiffany. It looks like you're nodding yes. Okay. So our three questions are, who are we reaching? Who is left out? And how are we engaging? So we'll start out maybe with the who are we reaching? And if everybody wants to take a second and just tell us even where you are and give us some context, that might be great for the group.
I'm down at the University of Texas at Dallas. Yeah, and my name is Tiffany Willoughby, and I work in the Office of Research as a program manager with research, education programs, and outreach.
Thanks, Tiffany.
I'm Kitty Cahalan. I work at Caltech's Center for Teaching, Learning, and Outreach, and I am an outreach program manager. So our office does lots of K-12 programming, partnering Caltech with our local schools and teachers.
Thank you.
I'm Amy Jo Clemens. I'm from Northern Illinois University, and I'm the director of the Center for P20 Engagement, which is an outreach engagement regional development division. We do a lot of STEM work, K-12. We also have an Illinois P20 network, which really focuses on college and career readiness.
Zach?
Hi, everybody. I'm Zach. I am at Michigan State University at the facility for rare isotope beams, which is soon to be the #1 rare isotope facility in the world. And my job is I'm the outreach coordinator, so I brag about it. And that involves tours, talks, summer camps, science festivals, whatever it is. So I get a lot of volunteers, but I do a lot of the outreach myself, and it's a lot of fun.
And Susan, I think you joined. We're just doing introductions, just what work you do or anything you want to share.
Yeah, hi, good morning. Sorry, I can't, my internet is bad today, so I have to leave it off. My name is Susan Rowe. I work for the Oregon State University, the Office of Pre-College Programs, and I'm the Research Grants and Engagement person there.
Okay, thank you. So the first question we have is who we're trying to reach. So it seems like we have a pretty big basket here. I guess we want to do popcorn style. Everybody can list a few of their audiences and we can get them on the board.
Audiences like for the work that we do, I'm sorry.
Yeah, for all of our broader impacts, who are our target audiences?
Our target audiences are about, for me, it's my K-12 audiences. And one side for the work that we do, but I work with the faculty, early career faculty and early stage broad impacts professionals to help them plan for broad impacts directed to K-12.
And I'll just jump in and say that we are just starting to launch a broader impacts program. So I'm kind of spearheading that. I'm definitely here to learn, but I primarily over the last few years have just worked with faculty. So I don't have much to contribute right now, but I'll be an excellent note taker, okay?
I'd say I'm the exact opposite, which is we've been so focused on outreach, we haven't really been doing as much engagement. Obviously, that's our division across campus. And so we're trying to launch broader impacts as a way to engage, especially, I think Susan called them early stage professionals.
And we have a lot of different audiences. We have K-12, so we have elementary programs, middle and high school. We have them in school, after school programs. We have some formal programs, we have informal programs. So our audience is students. We've done limited amount of professional development, but we'd like to do more. So teachers, and we do have a teacher research summer program, so teachers can come do research at Caltech during the summer. And then we also consider our students our audience because we're giving them professional development in teaching experience and outreach and communication experience. So we consider them an audience, even though they're our volunteers. Their professional development is part of our goals.
We have a pretty general audience. We're trying to communicate with the public, but our most intensive stuff is, of course, for K-12 and teacher professional development. Where we have the camps is really the thing. If we're going to see you for a whole week, you're going to get a lot of content Most people I only get for an hour, and I'm like, look at nuclear science, and that's fine.
Are your camps largely targeted at students or educators?
We have a week for teachers, and it's mostly high school, but some middle school teachers. We have a week for high school students, and then I contribute short courses for other programs that run for middle school and elementary school. So yeah, we get nuclear science at every level we can.
So it's interesting. We have people that are coming about this from completely different audiences, and many are actually trying to work towards the middle to reach a wider audience. At least that's the impression I got here from the conversation. So go ahead, Monica.
So I wanted to also contribute my answer to these, because my program was mostly directed to K-12 students. I mean, the idea is it's open to everybody, but really the most activities we did were with K-12 students. And when we went to virtual, I saw a very noticeable change in our audience. Or yeah, I mean, we still had a lot of K-12 engagement. But for example, the fact that we were running our workshops virtually enabled teachers to join. So educators are now joining our sessions that are directed at middle schoolers and high schoolers, but they find it a big interest and they want to see if they can reproduce those activities in their classroom. So they now join our activities as auditors. And I've had requests to give them contact hour certificates as well. So that's interesting. I definitely see a change when we went to virtual in our audience. And the other thing that I want to highlight about that, the change in our audiences, is how well when we were in person, we mostly reached Columbus students, and even those near the campus, because those who lived very far away had a hard time reaching the campus. Because probably their parents were working, couldn't bring them, and they didn't feel safe going on the bus. But when we went virtual, we reached people from the whole state. I mean, we even had requests from other countries, but mostly we grew our extent to the whole of Ohio as a state. So that was also an interesting change. Although I also see limitations in that students who don't have a device or don't have a good internet connection are not able to join. So that's something that I think it's worth highlighting.
So I know we've talked a bit about how are we engaging, but it might be good just to make sure you have enough time to talk about who's left out. I know a lot of us have been thinking about this during the pandemic, and this could include audiences you really were trying to work with before the pandemic that you have had challenges with, but popcorn style again, audiences you are trying to work with or would like to, but maybe there's been challenges.
Well, obviously it's hard to work with people on Zoom. Our local students all within a few weeks had devices and Wi-Fi, and how well that worked was a challenge. So we live, Caltech is in Pasadena. Pasadena is a Title I district, and they're our primary audience. They're mostly Latino and Black students, and so a lot of minoritized in STEM populations, which is one of our big goals, is to try to increase diversity. And so just trying to make sure that we are being open to the possibility that the district Chromebooks don't allow Zoom, and so we're going through teachers even for after school events, or else making sure that any program that we have is accessible to everybody who would otherwise want to access that program. The technology has definitely been our biggest challenge, trying to set up events that students who have limited device accessibility can, and being considered about our platforms, can access. But it's very hard because kids are zoomed out. I have 2 high schoolers. They're very sick of being online, and another online event is like, I'm not doing that. So we are starting to get back to in-person. California has very good COVID stats right now. And as soon as people are saying they'll get back in person, we're sending scientists to go be with them, because it's just obviously that much more engaging. Teachers, it's easier, they have access. So that hasn't been as difficult, and our grad students typically have access.
I was just gonna say a lot of what you said is our situation as well. We work a lot of some of our long-term after-school programs for after-school clubs aim to go to rural parts of Oregon, which has been our biggest challenge. We also have a mission to do programming that is rooted in equity and inclusion. So those from BIPOC communities that were already facing systemic barriers before are now even more exacerbated, especially in rural communities. So it has been a challenge that in terms of accessibility, just other further opportunities and other financial burden that was exacerbated by the pandemic. So we've been working this past year with a lot of grants for scholarships, for support, for participant support and all of that stuff. So the BIPOC communities, definitely rural areas. And just agreeing right now, it's being real challenge to the summer program. And I'm sorry about that. There's a lot of noise in here. The teachers are exhausted and so are the youth. So it's been a real challenge, especially now, to have any virtual summer programming because everybody is just exhausted. So we have pivoted a little to open spaces to just talk about life in general, bring in some social emotional learning. That is not necessarily our typical program, but it's recognizing that they need that space to heal and to breathe.
I know for our programs, and we collaborate quite a bit with 4-H and some after-school programs, we found that for students with devices and reasonable internet, even to run on a smartphone, it was wonderful, like Monica said, to be able to connect with students across the state in areas that never would have come to our programs, and that was uplifting. But then we've also been doing a lot of strategic work over the last year and a half to access more underrepresented minority communities and realizing the value in our own network of having emissaries the emissaries are very deeply seated in those communities. And I think none of our programs each of us don't have those, but as a collective, we're finding out our network has people that are in those positions. So like, for example, OSU Libraries has a program that works with students in inner city Columbus to get them summer jobs and does training, but it allows us to reach an audience that otherwise you have to have a really solid pathway in place and a lot of trust established. It's hard for us to do for one student a summer, but they offer for 10 or 12 students a summer. So it's easier to be part of that network. But obviously that was all suspended during the pandemic.
I was really excited to reach new audiences much farther away than we normally get. And that was great, but so for our summer high school camp, we usually get about 200 applicants nationwide. And I think we got 70 this year because they're just exhausted, apparently. And I don't blame them. But that's all we can offer for now.
What we've been asked to do instead of same thing, we usually have 500 kids coming on campus for all of our different camps, and things are exploding. Rockets are, in the main commons. Everybody loves it. This year, not in person, but what we have been asked to do more than we have in the past is to go into schools that are getting funds now to do their own summer schools. And so they're creating a STEM hour within their summer school program that they've never had before, because they're hoping to get many more kids than they've ever had before. And they're having us come in. And I gotta say, as the director, I like it because there's a lot less logistics. I don't have to figure out who's doing what at midnight and all that kind of stuff. But that's a whole, we haven't done as much of that before. We've gone in and done professional development, but not come in and actually work with the kids on site. And that's been something that's been taken off for the summer. So we're trying to rearrange everybody to make sure we can cover all those commitments.
So maybe to close out the last segment then, I always like to leave on an uplifting note. The last question was, how are we engaging? But maybe we'll twist that just a little bit to say, okay, what have you experienced over the last 14 months, the way you're engaging? You're like, I probably wouldn't have done that, but we're going to definitely keep it. It's definitely done something for our program and enhanced things.
Well, I'll jump in with we've always done a one-day STEM Fest in person. Obviously, it was virtual, but since it was going to be virtual, we spread it out so that it's a whole month worth of activities. So we're definitely going to keep that for this year, even though we are going to try a smaller in-person event. We're keeping the full month of activities as kind of a lead up, those being more virtual to the one day in person. So the team was really excited about that, and it seemed to work well. Even though our one day attendance wasn't very good compared to in person, that's why we're going to try to bring that back a little bit.
We have a lot of demonstrations and activities and things, very hands-on, but generally used a lot of very proprietary and specialized equipment, which I tried to make, easy for teachers to build. Like, here's instructions, here's where you could buy these things. But one of the first things we did was completely convert everything to just household items. For my big example is, this is a nucleus, but it's magnetic marbles, and not everybody has that lying around. Now we build our nuclei out of pennies and nickels or whatever it is they've got lying around the house. And so it'll be a lot easier, honestly, to work with students, even in person, if they were just using stuff that they can lay their hands on very easily.
Yeah, I agree. There's some of the programs that we have pivoted to do online. They are going to stay for sure. Elements of it, hybrid. I think it would not be so smart to think that we're going to go back to completely in person as we were before. I think we've learned with some of our programs, there's some elements that are helpful. For example, we have a program called Beaver Hangouts that connects with classrooms. Already was an online program. So we use that platform for like pre-visit, pre-campus visit, pre-program visits to connect with students and do some pre-preparation or post-preparation. So probably that will stay a little longer. We've also pivoted a lot of our curriculum, like you were saying, to in-home, like we did STEM at home to connect with families. And most of the curriculum was about either some things that they can easily find at home, but also recognizing that even for some of the families that we simple things are not that accessible. So we did STEM in a box, which actually we mailed the materials to families, to their houses before the virtual programming. So they actually they had the materials in front of them. And when we were doing so yeah, so there's a lot of pivoting to be able to reach our audiences and sending materials, but there's also a lot of elements of this hybrid connection that they're going to stay.
Okay, so we're about to go to the main room. So hang on to those.
I think everybody's going to be joining. Yep, everybody's coming in right here.
Actually,
Tiffany,
yeah,
you're still good to
already
give our report out for us?
I do believe that I can, and hopefully it's a good capture.
Thanks.
Sure.
Do we have everybody back? I think so, right? Okay, so let's talk about what we talked about in our breakout rooms. And since I was in the audience breakout room, I'm going to let people go with the other group go first. So who's going to report on the accessibility group?
We forgot to address that. We were just so busy chatting. Does anybody?
It's like I took a couple notes if someone else doesn't want to speak.
I'm happy to defer to Wayne.
All right, so we had a couple of questions that were related to, we talked a little bit about Science Olympiad and like what sorts of people we were either that we were missing with the fact that things were virtual and there was a need for accessibility in some cases. We also had questions about like, well, what types of transcribing are there for Zoom meetings and different presentations that we're doing, whether that's live transcription like we have today, or whether that's using Zoom's automated AI in order to figure out what those are. And there's pluses and minuses to each of those. We also talked a little bit about web accessibility. How do you make an interactive like website, and how do you address that sort of thing? We had that question, and Cynthia told us about the projects within pharmacy of how do you create something that where the interface may not be completely accessible. And so the idea of starting at the beginning and yes, it's doubling the work, but creating your accessible experiences at the same time as laying out your normal experiences was a key piece to all of that. That's sort of the nuts and bolts of what we talked about.
Thank you. Does anyone else from the other group or from that same group actually wants to add anything to that regarding accessibility? You don't have to, but if someone has something to say, I just wanted to give that opportunity.
Cynthia just sent me a quick note, and it's a really great point. If you aren't familiar with the captioning, you want to just watch it as we're talking, you can turn it on through the live transcript button. It has a little CC at the bottom. And for those of you who don't know, ARIS has provided a human to do that service today, but it's also a built-in service to Zoom. Although the non-human one sometimes puts funny things up, like I work with a Rabbitopsis, which they always put as Rabbit Office. So it makes me chuckle every time.
And if I may add to that, so English is not my first language. I'm English as a second language speaker. And I know that having caption is also good for me. So we kind of think of that as being for people who are hearing impaired, but it's also helpful for those of us who don't speak English as a native speaker. So I just wanted to add that. And if no one else has anything to add to the accessibility aspect, Tiffany, would you share what we talked about in our group about the audience, please?
Absolutely, I sure will. So what audiences we were reaching out to in our group were community members, K through 12 students and staff in school, after school, formal and informal, camps, professional development, teacher summer research programs. Our audiences were also volunteers who earn teaching experience and possibly certificates, early career faculty educators, joining sessions for middle and high school students as auditors, and then those teachers take that knowledge back to the classroom. In person, I know that one individual mentioned that they reached Columbus students, but over the last year, now that they're virtual, they were able to reach people from the entire state and even a few other countries. Students who don't have a device or internet connection are not able to join now. And that's from the audience. Do you want me to continue on with who we were missing?
Yes, please, if you can do that, that'd be great.
I sure can. One person mentioned Title I district, specifically Latino and Black students, underrepresented populations. They want to make programs accessible to all, so they're really focusing on the appropriate platform. Rural Oregon, after school programs, they've run into systemic barriers. They're more exacerbated. Accessibility is an issue. They've been working on grants and scholarships for participant support. Teachers are exhausted and so are the youth. So they are pivoting and bringing in social and emotional learning, creating a space to heal and to breathe. 4-H, nice to connect with people across the state, working to access more underrepresented populations. Our network has access to audiences that we can tap into. Some accessibility was suspended during the pandemic. Other people that were missing, summer camp, generally 200 registrations. So registration is low for this summer, only 70. More requests for pushes into school. This is a bonus. It's less logistics for the organizer to work with the kids. We're rearranging everyone to cover the commitment. And I like that idea, by the way, the push into the schools. I think that's a bonus. How are we engaging? This was our last bullet. What have you experienced over the last 15 months? STEM Fest, a whole month of activities. And when we go back to in person, it will be a smaller event, a one-day event. Demonstrations and activities, proprietary and specialized equipment was used. this year the individual used household items, and it was spoken of a nuclei with pennies and nickels. And then hybrid classes will be the trend in the future. Beaver Hangouts, we've used that platform for pre-programming and post-programming, also using things at home, STEM in a box, mail items in a box to use for the program.
Thank you, Tiffany, for the very thorough report. And we are running out of time, so I want to keep going. But before we go to the next slide, I just wanted to mention that we started putting together a document with resources that are good in the virtual environment. So I'm going to share the link for that on the chat. And this is a collaborative document. So we only put a few examples in there, and we want you to add to it. I know there's a lot of very helpful resources out there, but sometimes it's hard to know them all. So perhaps you can share with all of us, the community today, what are those great resources that you have found. And again, just feel free to whenever you have a time, just add to that document and hopefully be useful to all of us. But let's keep going. And so with that, I'll pass it on to Wayne, and the next slide, please.
Sorry. So a lot of the things that we started with were sort of like our individual programs, but we were starting to support each other individually. So this slide sort of represents some of the first programs that we started doing. So we have anything from virtual camps with Buckeye AHA math moments. We had interactive experiences. We had virtual tours that were put up. We started doing panel discussions about like current movies, relating to like science fiction back into the real science, and including Making Space for All, which was an initiative out of the astronomy department that focused on people who either were underrepresented in science or needed those accessible sort of things to go forward in their careers. And so there was a lot of conversation about like, how do you become an astronaut who might be deaf? And the fact that we don't include that as, a path forward for many people. And so it brought up a lot of interesting sort of discussions in that sense. So we started off with a lot of programs. One of the big things that our group did was, work together and learn from each other. All of us is a lot smarter than any one of us. And all of us learned a lot more about the university and how to get through and create amazing events than any one person could have done, because I know that I could not have done any of the things I did without the rest of our team. So like we worked together to innovate new ideas, but we also worked together in order to put in new grants and submissions for like this conference. And so like us working as a team allowed us to do things rather than the sort of like freak out and figure out what we were trying to do alone. And so I know that, at least speaking for myself, I know I was able to do a significant amount more because I had the support of people near me that may not have been doing the same things, but I could learn from, I could bounce ideas off of, and really move forward in that sense. And then the other thing that our team did was try to provide professional networking and support for local teachers specifically, but for anybody who was doing sort of the outreach and broader impacts stuff around the state of Ohio. So we had, here's another like audience question that we can do another Zoom bomb with. But how would you describe your pandemic outreach experience? Did you try to transition existing programs and convert it to virtual? Did you offer specifically new programs, or did you transition some and develop a few more? So I guess if you can type in a little bit about your experience into the chat about what you all were doing, that would be super helpful, and then we'll count down. All right, we'll do count of 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and go. Okay, so I see a lot of transitions and a lot of, we wanted to do more virtual program, and now we have the reason for it, 100% on that one. There were some things that are so much easier to do online, especially like was brought up, like visiting a classroom. I don't have to drive to a school, figure out how to get to the classroom and everything else. We can just jump in and go. So excellent. And then how would you describe the success of your pandemic outreach programs? Was it stuff that just didn't work out at all the way you had hoped? Did it meet different expectations, or you thought that it went stellar? And we'll do another Zoom bomb. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Awesome. So it sounds like you all experienced a lot of the very same emotions that our group did as we moved forward. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide, and we can talk a little bit about like what worked and what didn't. So with Westfest, we brought together, a lot of departments, and so this was a week-long festival where a lot of people presented, and we had really good audience turnout. Our Guess Who program, which is our brand new game show that we briefly mentioned in our breakout room, was highly successful in the sense that we brought together researchers, we brought together our guessers from the community, and for both Columbus and OSU community, and we created this brand new interactive game show that was positive for both the people that were involved with it and the audience that was there. And then we also had our STEM education office hours, where every 2 weeks we were trying to provide a professional development meeting where teachers could come in and talk to us about anything, and we would help them with whatever. So out of all of that, if you use the metric of did it meet our expectations, some of those were very successful and some of those were not successful, but they were all successful in the sense that we learned about new audiences, we learned about new needs. And so it wasn't so much that any one program was bad, but it allows us to learn from that experience and keep moving on to sort of our next stuff. Our STEM office hours were not well attended, but they did give us an opportunity to meet some educators around the state and find out about new problems that weren't really on our radar, but it also told us something else about teachers. Teachers were looking to survive, just survive. And so they just weren't looking for those things. So it may just not have been the right time to have those types of experiences. So I guess we can go on to the next slide, unless someone else has something else to say. So I guess the next thing is like, what have we learned and what are we doing looking forward? Some questions that we have are, what do we want to carry forward when we go back to in-person activities? What are things that we miss about working together? What are things that we will never miss about working in our digital environment? I guess we can open up a little bit of discussion for that.
I think some of the secret sauce to what's made our group work is there's no administrative mandate to do any of this. So a lot of us accreted around this goal of get stuff done and try to be with a cohort of similar people that had interests and work that maybe overlapped. It was complementary. So each of us had a different skill set. We know there's certain skills we have that it's best to ask somebody else to help with it. Everybody kind of volunteers their level of commitment, and we realize our departments have different pushes and pull factors that we have to acknowledge within that work, that I think everybody here gives and takes well to make sure we can accomplish our unit goals that we set in our department goals, but still accomplish more as a group together. And there's a lot of trust, I think, that as we ask new members to join the group, we kind of trust that other members have worked with them in the past and they have a demonstrated commitment to doing stuff together.
Yeah, if I could piggyback on that, I think one of the main, it's not that we want to be exclusive, but we don't want anyone to join our group that just wants to have their name on a project. We only want people who are actively contributing. We call ourselves the worker bees, like we're the ones who are going to get it done. And there was something else I felt that had a reflection that was meaningful, and now I can't remember what it was. Oh, I wanted to, so like our goal now, because like as Jason was saying, different units have different levels of freedoms like to their staff. And so some folks might have to advocate for their participation in this group a little bit more than others. And so we are trying to kind of establish ourselves as more, we've renamed ourselves from the Westfest Collaborative to the STEM Impact Collaborative. And we're trying to kind of establish ourselves as a STEM outreach working group within the university as a way of justifying the amount of time that we're putting into these projects. But one way that I justify it to my groups, I mean, I work with plant sciences. So Arabidopsis doesn't bring all the boys to the yard at all times. But I know, right, Zach? But by collaborating with people of different disciplines, we have a greater probability of reaching a bigger audience, right? Wayne can bring all the boys to the yard with astronomy. more so than Arabidopsis. And so we're building a robust audience that will hopefully carry through to all of our disciplines.
Right, but just because I bring people in doesn't mean that I get the same audiences that everybody else has. And so I really like the fact that we bring a diverse audience together.
And for me, it has been, this collaboration has been really important because I was new not only to Ohio State, but like my career path is newer than the rest of the group, I guess. And it has been really helpful to get to talk to someone who has been in the field for a longer time, especially at OSU, and reaching more contacts in our environment. But also, you know, it's not always about reinventing the wheel. So with these guys, I've learned a lot about like, hey, here's a cool program I put together. And then I'm like, well, can I do something similar? And I've been like copying ideas. So it's great to create a group like this and just brainstorm and get more ideas for your outreach programs.
Really quickly, because I know we're coming to the end of the hour, and I'm sure everyone like me would like to use the restroom before the next session, but Amy Jo had asked a question about funding. So yes, each of us are funded individually through our unit. And I think we span 2 colleges plus the Office of Research in terms of where we sit within the university. And then we started seeking funding together. So like the Westfest event, that has historically been a grant funded program, which means that we have to write a grant proposal every year, which is kind of annoying, but that brings in some external funds, not to support our salaries per se, but to get the tents if we're in person, or the ASL interpreters if we're virtual. And then we just submitted under Monica's vision a new grant to hopefully get like a STEM dance outreach program, but we're starting to kind of eke into co-funding.
It is important to figure out ways to celebrate and kind of toot your own horn of your successes, because a lot of the programs we have that work end up benefiting the entire campus. So outreach, we don't recoup our own time on that. The funding for the tents and everything is what we use the grant money for. But we have, 4 times as many units as are on this call that are participating in that, and we're helping them make stronger, broader impacts for their federal grants. So making sure you articulate that, because it helps when you ask for those grants centrally to fund things.
And we're starting to get more and more faculty reaching out to include Westfest as part of their broader impacts. I actually just helped with a broader impact statement with a faculty from chemistry the other day who wants to get involved. With that said, any final thoughts before we release you all to the wild?
I guess if we can click through to the last page, at least, for everybody to see our contact and social if you're looking for us. I mean, the one thing that I wanted to just mention just before we all disappeared was, don't just look at did you meet your expectations, but always look at what your outcomes really were. Because I know that a lot of our programs, we wouldn't have said met our expectations, but they were highly successful in completely different ways, either in highlighting something that we can do better, or just reaching a really cool audience, or doing something that's just new. And so I think that over the last year, all of these things that we learned were highly successful in many different respects than we would have set out initially to like, this is what I want out of this program.
Thank you all for joining us. Hopefully we'll see you in person next year.
Yeah.